Hello and welcome to the program UFO Warning. In this episode we're talking about who is UAP Gerb and the controversy surrounding Luis Elizondo and the rumored UFO Czar. That's correct. Who is UAP Gerb and the controversy surrounding Luis Elizondo and the rumored UFO Czar? Now before I get into this, just let me remind you that I haven't always been a big Luis Elizondo fan. He blocked me a long time ago on my Twitter feed, a tiny little feed with 415 followers. Not sure what that's about. Gary Nolan also blocked me, and I don't want to be sued, and I don't want to be waterboarded. Just get that out there right off the top. So what we're talking about is just stuff that I've been able to find online and find on AI. I don't normally talk about a lot of the personalities, but this thing's gotten so much traction in the news lately. I just kind of felt like I had to address it, see what's happening. So I ran the numbers through AI and asked it to help me come up with some answers here. Today we're diving into one of the biggest controversies currently dividing the UFO disclosure movement. It involves an anonymous researcher known as UAP Gerb, former Pentagon official Luis Elizondo, and a rumor that has sent shockwaves through the UFO community that Elizondo could become the government's next so-called UFO Czar. Now, before we begin, it's important to separate the verified facts from speculation. There are some things we know, some things that have been proposed, and some claims that remain unverified, and we'll look at all of that. Let's start with the man at the center of this story. Who exactly is UAP Gerb? Unlike many of the personalities in the UFO world, almost nothing is publicly known about his identity. He has remained anonymous throughout his career, choosing instead to let his research speak for itself. Gerb has developed a reputation as one of the most meticulous document researchers in the UFO community. Rather than focusing on eyewitness encounters or sensational claims, he spends countless hours digging through government archives, Freedom of Information Act releases, military records and congressional documents, and intelligence reports. His investigations often last several hours and are packed with citations, historical records, and official documents. Even people who are skeptical of UFOs have acknowledged the depth of his research because he generally attempts to build his conclusions from publicly available evidence instead of relying on unnamed insiders. One of Gerb's central arguments is that the United States government has never simply covered up the UFO issue. Instead, he believes the information has been carefully compartmentalized and strategically managed. According to Gerb, the government doesn't necessarily hide everything. Instead, it controls when information is released, how it's presented, and how much the public is allowed to know at any given time. The idea has become known as controlled disclosure. Gerb believes that beginning around 2017, something significant changed. For decades, the government largely denied the UFO phenomenon or dismissed it altogether. Then, suddenly, everything changed. The Navy released the now famous gun camera videos. Congress began holding hearings. Whistleblowers stepped forward. The Pentagon created the All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, better known as AARO. The major newspapers began treating UFOs as legitimate national security stories. Many people viewed these events as evidence that the government was finally becoming transparent. Gerb sees something different. He argues that rather than spontaneous disclosure, this may represent a carefully managed release of information designed to control the public narrative while continuing to protect whatever remains classified. That belief has brought him into direct conflict with one of the biggest names in modern UFO disclosure, Luis Elizondo. Elizondo became famous in 2017 after being identified as the former director of the Pentagon's Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program, or AATIP. Since then, he has testified before Congress, appeared in numerous documentaries, written a best-selling book, and become one of the public faces of the disclosure movement. Most disclosure supporters view Elizondo as one of the heroes who forced the government to acknowledge that unidentified anomalous phenomena are real. Gerb, however, has raised difficult questions. He argues that before Elizondo became a public whistleblower, he was also part of the national security system responsible for protecting highly classified information. Gerb has suggested that if Elizondo previously worked to safeguard sensitive programs, then the public should carefully examine whether his current role represents full transparency or a continuation of controlled disclosure. It's important to stress that these are Gerb's allegations and questions. They have not been independently verified, and Elizondo strongly disputes them. The controversy intensified recently during an interview with investigative journalist Ross Coulthart. During that disclosure, Gerb stated that he had heard persistent rumors suggesting Luis Elizondo could eventually be appointed to a senior government position overseeing UAP policy, a position many online have nicknamed the UFO Czar. According to Gerb, placing Elizondo in charge of any future disclosure effort would be deeply concerning because he believes someone connected to the existing intelligence system should not oversee what information reaches the public. But here's where it's important to separate rumor from reality. At this time, there is no official position within the United States government called the UFO Czar. No appointment has been announced. No executive order has created such an office. So where did this rumor come from? Reports surfaced earlier this year that Elizondo had prepared a policy memo for the incoming Trump administration. According to those reports, a memo proposed creating a senior advisor within the National Security Council to coordinate policy involving emerging technologies, drones, and unidentified anomalous phenomena. Because of that proposal, speculation quickly spread that Elizondo himself might eventually fill such a position if it were ever created. Again, that remains speculation. No official announcement has been made. Luis Elizondo has responded forcefully to Gerb's claims. He has publicly denied the allegations, calling them false and unsupported. Elizondo has also criticized both Gerb and Ross Coulthart for discussing rumors without presenting verifiable evidence. He has stated that he even offered Gerb the opportunity to contact him directly with questions, but says that never happened. According to Elizondo, spreading unverified accusations damages the credibility of the entire disclosure movement. So, what should we make of all this? In many ways, this controversy isn't really about whether a UFO Czar will exist. It's about trust, and should disclosure be led by former intelligence officials who understand the system from the inside, or should it come from independent researchers who believe those same institutions have spent decades controlling the flow of information? That's the real debate. On one side are people who believe insiders like Luis Elizondo are the only individuals capable of changing government policy, and on the other are researchers like Gerb who argue that insiders may continue protecting secrets even while appearing to promote transparency. At this point, there is no publicly available evidence confirming that Luis Elizondo is about to become a government UFO czar. There's also no official confirmation that such a position even exists. Those claims remain rumors. However, the debate that they have sparked does reveal something much larger. The disclosure movement itself is changing. It is no longer divided simply between believers and skeptics. Increasingly, it is divided over who should be trusted to tell the public truth. And perhaps that's the most important question of all. There is a video on this of Coulthart talking to Gerb. I want to play a short excerpt of this. They've kind of got my attention. And then we'll look a little bit at Lou's history. And I already know how I feel about Lou being a UFO czar. I mean, this is a straight-up non-starter for me, but I also know there are people that listen to the program that probably think that Lou's sun rises and sets in the sky, and they think that would be great. You can decide after we take a look at this just a little bit further. So let's go ahead and listen to this clip of Gerb calling out Luis Elizondo. Only a minute and a half long.
There are those who are digging for that reverse engineering recovery program of non-human technology. And there are those who are saying, just be happy with what you've got. Be happy with the small d disclosure. Is someone trying to control the narrative?
Yes. You made a statement recently as of recording this program where you talked about allegations and rumors of a pretty high-profile person within the UAP topic being appointed at a very high level to kind of spearhead the disclosure initiative or be integral to it out of the White House or executive branch. I'm going to go ahead and take that leap, and I will be very plain here. That individual is Luis Elizondo, and he is currently being tasked, likely has the position for a National Security Council level role, exactly what he had been looking for as the quote-unquote UAP Czar. This is detrimental to the disclosure process. This is extremely concerning. Like you said, of partial disclosure, limited disclosure, we have seen this before. This takes us back to the year of 2017, in which Lou Elizondo and a cadre of other individuals under a program, an informal working group called ATIP, the Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program, had been working from 2009 to roll out a partial disclosure campaign at the behest of Lieutenant General and Director of National Intelligence James Clapper. Once again, we are in this situation, and it is perilous for the disclosure effort.
I can only say wow after listening to that take right there. That is really something. This did not go unnoticed by Lou Elizondo, believe me, and he did have a response, and we'll play that for you next. This next clip is Lou himself responding. Now, what happened was Lou posted an 8-minute, 48-second clip of himself speaking from his vehicle. He says he's pulling a trailer, moving back to Washington, D.C., so that's something to think about. I guess if you were going to be a UFO czar, that would be the place to live. And like I said, the clip lasts about 8 minutes, 48 seconds. I found it over at Reddit on New Wasabi 4318. They're the one that had this posted. It's a nice place to go and watch the entire video clip without having to sit through somebody narrating it. You get to about just over, 2 minutes, 8 seconds, 2 minutes, 10 seconds. And then he addresses the topic of UAP Gerb, calling him out as the next UFO czar. It's interesting. I'll go ahead and play it right here for you. You can see what you think.
The second issue was brought to my attention that there was a interview done very recently on Ross Coulthart's Reality Check show under the News Nation moniker. And they had a guest on there that spoke really some incredible outlandish claims that are 180 degrees false and they're just not factual. So what I want to do is address that real quick. And why is that? Because in this process of disclosure, there are people out there that are trying to hijack and derail this conversation by feeding you false information. People who claim to be on the inside, who know information, they don't. And they're saying things, frankly, I can only suspect for clicks and likes. So please be careful of that. First and foremost, one of the allegations was that ATIP was a limited hangout. Well, let's not forget that in 2009, Senator Harry Reid himself, who was the chairperson for the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence for the U.S. Senate, that was his program. That was his. They paid for it with U.S. taxpayer money, and he even sent a letter in 2009, a official memo to the Deputy Secretary of Defense, Lynn, at the time. So if this was a limited hangout that was being paid by U.S. government taxpayer money, then by default you're saying that the sissy itself is a limited hangout, and by extension the U.S. Congress and even the U.S. government. So that simply doesn't make sense. It's factually not correct. It's not true. Not sure where this individual's getting their information. But they're not getting it from people who actually know. Another allegation that was made during this interview was that somehow General Clapper and I had colluded with one another to try to go ahead and create this soft disclosure, and that we were going to go ahead and manage it and control it. That is 1,000% not accurate. In fact, we never had such a conversation, and Jim Clapper and I never met to have that conversation. So again, it's factually not correct. And the problem is that you have an individual here who is sensationalizing stuff and making stuff up, quite frankly, who has ulterior motives. That's deceiving you. And furthermore, they're getting attention on a national news network that, by the way, I respect, and that's always been a friend of disclosure, and now manipulating them and providing false information to their audience to the point where they're like a tabloid. And I think this is problematic. If you want to know why I've always said I want to destroy ufology and replace it with something better, this is why. Because of bad actors like this, people who come out, they're just interested in clicks and likes, they're only interested in manufactured and false drama, and they're going about doing things that are actually putting disclosure further back than where we are. And this is a problem. I'll share something else with you, too, another anecdote about to show you the character of this individual. Recently, as a month ago, I attended a function in Washington, D.C. This individual happened to be there. I didn't know who he was, but I saw a circle of people surrounding him, and they were berating him. I worried for his safety to some degree, and maybe figured he was getting picked on, and walked over and interjected. And as I pulled him away, I was told, hey, that's the guy that's been talking crap about everybody and been making things up. So I pulled him aside and I said, hey, look, these people are obviously pretty upset with you. If you have any questions in the future, here's my personal cell phone number. Now, this went against my better judgment, but I did it anyways. As you all know, I'm very open and transparent. So I said, look, if you ever have any questions, please give me a call. And obviously, he looked at me. He had, to me, it looked like tears in his eyes. He looked at me and said, oh, okay, sir, yes, I promise I'll do that. I'll make sure that I call you if I have any questions in the future, and I won't do that. And just start spewing off of garbage. And I was good. I appreciate that. We can be friends. I'm happy to, whether you agree with me or not, I'm happy to give you information. Just reach out to me and I can clarify stuff. Well, guess what? A month later, he goes on a network television series and starts spewing off more crap. That was completely wrong. He never called me once. Right? So what kind of due diligence, investigative type skill set does it require just to go out and make up stuff about people, right? And this is why we're having a problem. If you want to know what's wrong with the UFO community, you have people out there, and by the way, yes, I'm addressing you who lied, to look in the mirror. You're the reason why we're having this problem with disclosure. You're the reason why people don't take this topic seriously, and frankly, you should be ashamed of yourself. I know I'm ashamed for what you did. You should be embarrassed. And the fact that you're talking to people and claiming you have access to stuff you don't, I don't ever remember you in any of the meetings that I was at the Pentagon or at ATIP, quite frankly. In fact, if you want inside information, going to talk to somebody and saying you have an inside source, as far as I'm concerned, that's called gossip. That's not information. And secondly, I think it's also important to say that as you continue to disparage and provide false information, remember, there's real consequences. There are real consequences for your actions and what you are doing. And I would not want to be you right now, because when this all comes out that you're just BSing, I think there's going to be a price to pay. So anyways, folks, I hope you're well. I didn't want to address this. I hate having to do this because all it does is goad people and more people to want to have conversations. I'm in the middle of a drive across country. Last thing I need to do is, deal with this headache. But I think it's important enough to address it and address it head on and let you know the truth. I've always been committed to the truth. Hopefully most of you know that by practice. And be wary. Be very careful of people who are trying to paint a false narrative and then try to get attention for it. Very, very disingenuous. Very disingenuous. So here I am, folks, once again. And Ross, that goes for you, man. I love you, buddy. But you have my phone number. You can call me anytime. You know that. So if you have any questions of who I am or what I'm doing, that's never stopped you before from calling me. Just give me a shout. We have to be careful with media here, especially News Nation, who's a friend to disclosure. They've got a reputation. A lot of people listen to them. So we've really got to do our due diligence in making sure that the information that is being provided is accurate. And I do appreciate what you're doing, Ross. But please, for the love of God, be more careful with who you decide to have on your program.
Traditional home security only alerts you after a break-in, and that's too late. SimpliSafe is changing that.
Stop. This is SimpliSafe. Police are on the way.
We don't just alert, we stop crime before it starts. SimpliSafe, plan starting around $1 a day. Save 50% on your new system with professional monitoring at simplisafe.com/Spotify or with promo code Spotify.
Outdoor deterrence requires a SimpliSafe Active Guard outdoor protection plan starting at $49.99 a month. Visit simplisafe.com/licenses for alarm license information. Tennessee 2012.
I don't know about you, but that was just absolutely wild to me. It seems like Lou is really jacked up about this. And did he threaten UFO Gerb? I mean, he says there's going to be consequences. Well, coming from someone that used to work at Gitmo, you might consider that. I don't know. And then the way he talks, it's almost like he's talking down to Coulthard. Yeah, Ross, buddy. It's almost like, it seems to me like Lou is speaking to Coulthard as if Lou is his handler or something, and Ross has gotten out of line or gone off script here, and Lou's not happy about it. That's how I interpret it. Just my personal opinion. I don't have anything to prove that. Just looking at the video, seeing how Lou reacted, to me, overreacted, and his response. What I would interpret if I was Gerb, I would be like, "Wow, that seems like a veiled threat to me, coming from someone like Louis, connected 7 ways to Sunday to the deep state." I don't know, very strange stuff. But I like to just compare those two clips side by side. Now, before we wrap it up, the last 2 things I want to look at is a little bit more of Lou's history, okay, kind of what his personality type is, what he did at Gitmo, and then what would the job of UFO Czar entail, and is that something that we would want to even create? And if we did create it, is that something that we could trust Lou to do? Is this how you want to see disclosure go? And myself, I'm not even that worried about disclosure, because disclosure implies that somebody knows something and it's on that party to reveal what they know to the rest of us. I don't think that's ever going to happen, because I think the people that really know the stuff are never going to tell us the parts we don't want to hear, like missing people, the Bigfoot connection, cattle mutilations, all these things that get into super high strangeness. They're never going to address that. They're going to give you some fuzzy pictures flying across. They're going to talk about some different things, but they don't ever want to cross that border between what we perceive as paranormal and UFO stuff, because the whole thing just, it becomes so complicated. As long as they can keep these as mechanical ships or orbs, I think that they're able to somehow control the narrative. But once we go beyond that, it opens up a whole nother can of worms. It also opens up the notion that these unnamed, unmasked individuals that populate our government agencies and corporations that have more or less taken over the government, those people, that handful of people at the very core of this thing, it would expose them. It would maybe even expose this idea that they are in collusion with whatever these things are that we can't define. It gets pretty deep pretty fast. So right now, let's go ahead and take a look at what AI has to say about Luis Elizondo's work activities at Gitmo. As far as his military stuff goes, seems to be a lot of questions about Lou's time at Gitmo. Now, right off the bat, it says there is no publicly available evidence that Luis Elizondo personally participated in waterboarding, torture, or enhanced interrogations, although he acknowledged working in counterterrorism and has said he served at Guantánamo Bay and Camp 7 intelligence roles. Neither official records nor credible reporting have established that he personally conducted or authorized waterboarding or torture. Most people do know him as the former Pentagon official who helped bring the Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program, or ATIP, into the public spotlight. But before UFOs became his public identity, Elizondo spent decades working in military intelligence and counterterrorism. That part of his career has recently come under renewed scrutiny, with some critics asking exactly what he did during the War on Terror, including his work at Guantánamo Bay. Let's go ahead here and separate some documented facts from speculation. Luis Elizondo attended the University of Miami, where he studied microbiology and immunology, along with chemistry and mathematics. His original goal was a career in science, but during his research, he became interested in intelligence work. Obviously, the guy's not stupid. He enlisted in the United States Army in the mid-1990s and served in South Korea and other assignments before transitioning into civil intelligence work in 1998. Following the terrorist attack of September 11, 2001, Elizondo's career changed dramatically. According to his own published biography, he served in Afghanistan as an operations officer, counterintelligence coordinator, and battle captain. Over the following years, he worked throughout the Middle East, Latin America, and the Caribbean on counterterrorism and counterintelligence missions targeting organizations such as Al-Qaeda, ISIS, and Hezbollah. These aspects of his career are broadly consistent across his biography and other public accounts. One assignment has generated particular interest: Guantánamo Bay. Public biographies and interviews indicate that Elizondo worked at the Guantánamo Bay detention facility and Camp 7, the highly secretive section that housed some of the United States' highest valued terrorist detainees. Camp 7 was established to hold prisoners such as Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, the alleged mastermind of the September 11th attacks, along with other senior al-Qaeda figures. Very little about operations inside Camp 7 has been made public. So what was Elizondo's role? Well, based on publicly available information, he served as a military intelligence officer and counterintelligence professional. His responsibilities reportedly included intelligence operations, evaluating terrorist networks, and supporting national security missions. However, the exact operational details of his assignment remain classified. This has led to an obvious question. Did Lou Elizondo personally conduct interrogations? Exactly what I'd be thinking about if I was UAP Gerb. The answer is that there is no public evidence establishing that he personally interrogated detainees. Some articles and biographies loosely describe him as having worked in counterterrorism operations or intelligence assignments connected to Guantanamo, but none provide verified evidence that he personally questioned prisoners. Likewise, there is no publicly available evidence showing that he personally carried out enhanced interrogation techniques. An even more serious allegation occasionally appears online, that is, did Elizondo participate in torture or waterboarding? Based on the evidence currently available, there is no verified documentation supporting that claim. No court record, Inspector General report, military investigation, or declassified government document has publicly identified Luis Elizondo as participating in waterboarding or torture. The distinction is important. Working at Guantánamo Bay during the years when controversial interrogation techniques were being used does not by itself establish personal involvement in those practices. The historical context, however, is impossible to ignore. During the early years of the War on Terror, the United States authorized what became known as enhanced interrogation techniques. These methods included prolonged sleep deprivation, stress positions, exposure to extreme temperatures, forced nudity, and in certain CIA camps, waterboarding. These practices remained among the most controversial aspects of post-9/11 intelligence operations. Because Elizondo served in national security positions during that period, critics have naturally asked what his responsibilities were and whether he had any connection to those activities. So far, no publicly available evidence has answered those questions by placing him at those interrogations. In fact, Elizondo has consistently described himself as an intelligence and counterintelligence officer rather than an interrogator. Another reason the issue remains controversial is that much of Elizondo's career is still classified. Large portions of his government service remain protected by national security restrictions, making independent verification difficult. Supporters argue that this lack of detail reflects the sensitive nature of intelligence work. Critics argue that it leaves too many unanswered questions. Both perspectives continue to fuel debate. After years in counterterrorism and counterintelligence, Elizondo eventually held senior positions within the office of the Undersecretary of Defense for Intelligence and later became associated with the Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program, or ATIP. His resignation from the Pentagon in 2017 marked the beginning of his public campaign to bring greater attention to unidentified anomalous phenomena. Since then, he has testified before Congress, appeared in documentaries, written a best-selling book, and became one of the best-known advocates for greater government transparency regarding UFOs, at least from a controlled narratives perspective. Yet his intelligence background continues to draw scrutiny. For some observers, that background enhances his credibility. They see a career intelligence professional willing to risk his reputation to bring an important issue before the public. For others, the same background raises concerns. They question whether someone who spent decades inside the intelligence community could ever be viewed as completely independent. At this point, the publicly documented record tells us several things. Lou Elizondo unquestionably served in military intelligence and later as a civilian intelligence officer. He worked on counterterrorism missions after September 11th. He served at Guantánamo Bay and Camp 7 in intelligence-related roles. However, there is no publicly verified evidence that he personally participated in waterboarding, torture, or enhanced interrogation techniques. It doesn't mean every detail of his career is known. It means that responsible reporting should distinguish between documented facts and unanswered questions and unsupported allegations. As always, that's where the search for the truth begins. I have to ask myself, Lou clearly has spent a lifetime working for various intelligence agencies, military, whatever. If that doesn't make him a spook, I don't know what does. To me, when you talk about these intelligence agencies, people who have top secret clearance, people like Lou himself has said that he has to go back and repeatedly, every few weeks or something, and take a polygraph test to make sure he hasn't spilled the beans on something. To my mind, this is kind of one of those gangs. You know the saying, blood in, blood out, where once you're in for life. And the only way you leave that gang is by the shedding of your own blood. It's almost like spiritual warfare to me. And I just can't see how we could ever think that Lou has escaped the control of these organizations that he spent his life working for. Now, that's not to downgrade him or put him down or anything like that, but I can't. There's a difference between disclosure and a controlled narrative. And what I see going on with Lou a lot is just a controlled narrative. And if you're getting a controlled narrative, you're not getting all the facts. You can be presented with the information, and the person giving you the information can present it any way they want to make you believe whatever they want. I don't even like the term disclosure, really, because, as I said before, it implies that somebody knows somebody has the whole picture. And it's at the prerogative of that somebody to disclose to us what they know and how much they know. I'm much more in favor of just, as I've said many times, crowdsourcing this. First time I heard that term was on Jason Goodman's YouTube channel, crowdsource the truth. Crowdsource the truth about UFOs, where we come together as a group and everybody contributes what they know, and we can all back check each other's work, talk about our own experiences, and each person individually come to their own conclusion. The same way that we can all look up in the sky and see what color the sky is. The same way we can observe with our eyes what's going on around us and make up our own minds, determine our own reality. I really don't think we need to have somebody else determining reality for us. Now, very quickly, I want to look at this, what the definition for a UFO Czar would be, and then we'll wrap this up. Now, if you ask AI, it'll tell you that at the moment there is no official U.S. government position called a UFO Czar. The term is an informal nickname that has been used in media reports and online discussions to describe a hypothetical senior official who would coordinate U.S. policy on unidentified anomalous phenomena. The idea gained attention after reports that Luis Elizondo drafted a memorandum recommending that the White House create a high-level position to coordinate UAP policy across the federal government. No position has been publicly established. This is bothersome to me. So Luis writes this paper up, hey, we need a high-level position, code word UFO Czar. Not that I'm recommending myself or anything. If Congress or the White House were to create one, the job would likely resemble other White House czar positions, such as cybersecurity or pandemic response coordinators. These officials typically do not run an agency themselves. Instead, they coordinate multiple departments and advise the president. In other words, they're another gatekeeper. And what does a gatekeeper do? Well, a gatekeeper decides what gets in and what gets kept out. What would a UFO Czar actually do? Well, if the position were created, its responsibilities would likely be to coordinate the Department of Defense, Intelligence Community, FAA, NASA, Department of Homeland Security, Department of Energy, Coast Guard, and the FBI. You see what's happening there? They're taking all these different UFO reports and they're compartmentalizing them. They're compartmentalizing them within these different agencies: Department of Defense, Intelligence Community, FAA, NASA, Department of Homeland Security, Department of Energy, Coast Guard, FBI. So instead of going to one department to find out what you're looking for, well, you'd have to go to 7 or 8. And to make things worse, then you'd have the UFO Czar on top of that pyramid deciding which ones were rendered top secret and which ones you could look at, deciding how much to blur the photographs before you had to look at them. In other words, a UFO czar would likely ensure these agencies share information instead of operating in separate silos. That's AI's opinion, not mine. In my opinion, the czar would likely ensure that these agencies close their silos off to you and I, put them all in one silo where the UFO czar could turn the spigot on and off at will. That's a much more logical conclusion to come to. Position would probably serve as the president's chief advisor on UAP issues. In other words, another gatekeeper. So if Trump gets out of line and decides he wants to release some pictures here and there, you would have the UFO czar saying, "Oh, Mr. President, I don't think we should do that." See, they want to get somebody probably kind of folksy, someone that Trump could trust because he has a history of not getting along that well with the deep state. I mean, they've threatened him many times. Well, got part of his ear removed here a couple of years ago, and maybe he's a little skittish around these folks. But maybe we could get a short little guy with an intense attitude, and maybe they could hit it off. Maybe we could find somebody he likes, somebody that who's actually very skilled in controlling people with his tongue. Maybe. The position will probably serve as the president's chief advisor on UAP issues, and that could include national security assessments, foreign adversary technology, intelligence collection, aerospace threats, scientific research, and public disclosure recommendations. In other words, we'll tell you what you can release, Mr. President, because clearly you're not qualified to do that. Supervising AARO. Today, the Pentagon's All-Domain Anomaly Research Office investigation military UAP reports. Now, you heard Louis talk about AARO. He's not impressed. Could you imagine how much fun he would have being in charge of these guys? My opinion only. A senior White House coordinator might oversee policy direction for AARO without managing its daily operations. Responsibilities could include setting investigative priorities, approving budgets, ensuring cooperation between agencies, and reporting findings to Congress and the President. In other words, the guy that took over Sean Kirkpatrick's job, well, you're going to be taken down a couple notches. We'll just put Lou in charge of that. Coordinating classified programs. One of the most controversial possibilities involves alleged legacy special access programs. Now remember, special access programs means there's maybe a half a dozen people in Congress that didn't even know what's going on here, and a lot of times the president doesn't even know. Think about that. If such programs exist, a senior White House official could be responsible for determining who has legal oversight, reviewing security classifications, coordinating congressional notifications, and deciding what information can be declassified. This aspect is speculative because the existence of such programs has not been publicly established. Yeah, you're going to put somebody in charge of programs that they don't admit exist. That's a killer there, isn't it? Leading disclosure policy. Perhaps the most visible responsibility would involve determining what information the public receives. That could include decisions about releasing military videos, declassifying historical documents, publishing annual reports, and responding to major sightings, and communicating with Congress and the media. Well, in other words, somebody to quiet down this horde of UFO believers. I mean, you've got thousands of people at this point, tens of thousands, running around at these UFO conferences, having these little meetups. I suppose the deep state is probably concerned about this movement reaching critical mass at some point, where they say 12% of the population gets behind something, and that's where you hit critical mass at. We've got to be getting close to that right now. And then it gets out of hand. It's just like a wildfire. So yeah, I imagine they're looking for somebody who's recognizable to the masses. Now, Louis is, I think, a polarizing figure, but he might be known enough to calm some of these people down. I'm at the point where I think that any message presented the right way is going to fool most of the people. Many allied nations collect UAP reports. A White House coordinator might work with NATO allies, Five Eyes intelligence parties, civilian aviation organizations, and space agencies. Well, who better to do that than somebody who's been in intelligence all their life? Some people support this idea because they argue that no single federal office currently has authority over the entire UAP issue. They think this would eliminate duplication, improve intelligence sharing, create consistent reporting standards, and brief the president directly, and provide Congress with clear information. This is where UAP Gerb and others have raised concerns. Critics argue that if the position were filled by a longtime intelligence officer, the office might become less about disclosure and more about controlling what information reaches the public. And actually controlling the information is in the definition of this thing, czar, okay? Derived from the word Caesar, okay? Dictator, UFO dictator. When you think of the word UFO czar, think of the word UFO dictator. Does that help? Their concerns include increased secrecy, selective disclosure, protecting classified programs, controlling the public narrative, and filtering information before Congress or the public sees it, of course. Now, why has Elizondo's name become associated with the position? Several reports have stated that Elizondo proposed creating a senior National Security Council advisor for UAP and related emerging technologies. Because of his experience in military intelligence, the Pentagon, and public UAP advocacy, speculation followed that he could be a candidate if such a position were ever created. Yeah, just don't ask him to produce pictures of actual UFOs. Not such a good track record there, my opinion. However, there is no official announcement that the position exists, has been approved, or Elizondo has been selected to fill it. And we can go on and talk a little bit about the authority they would have, but like I said, to me, this is just a position that should be called UFO dictator. I don't think we need it. What concerns me, though, is that Lou is moving back to Washington, D.C., and he did seemed to be pretty upset with UAP Gerb and Coulthard for letting UAP Gerb come out and possibly blow his cover on this thing. I guess we'll have to stay tuned. Not really sure what happens. Like I said, not trying to get sued or threatened or waterboarded or anything like that, but I just felt like this topic has gotten so much attention in the news that we needed to cover it. If you like the program, don't forget to hit like, follow, subscribe. Doesn't cost a dime. Until next time, this is UFO Warning. Over and out.